now, for our final agenda point before we head off later for lunch and for another break, we're going to be hearing from ParityQC. And I think this is a really interesting and exciting story to listen into. ParityQC is a successful Austrian spin-off that is pioneering quantum architecture, and in fact is the only company in the world to do so. So really a market leader in a tech space that is really a frontier and is really important. I think it's quite exciting to have an Austrian company that is doing that. First, we'll be hearing from the co-CEOs, Wolfgang Lechner and Magdalena Hauser. They're going to be sharing insights about their technology, their vision, and their market leadership. And then afterwards, they'll be joined on stage by Julia Reilinger from BNC Innovation Investments, who will be sharing insights about why they chose to back ParityQC, and the conversation will be moderated by Lisa that we just saw. So please give a warm welcome to the ParityQC team, Magdalena and Wolfgang. Cheers.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here. So indeed, we would like to present ParityQC. And the most important thing is already on the first slide. We are a quantum architecture company, and we will hopefully show you what this actually means and how it positions in the market. What we do is we develop blueprints for quantum computers, which are highly scalable and commercially useful. So this means we are not building the hardware ourselves. We are making the blueprints and licensing them to hardware developers, similar to ARM doing in the microprocessor field.
When we think about future technologies, I think most of you think about AI first, right? But I think we can all agree on that AI era is now. So when we talk about future technology, it's really quantum computing. And it is because it's such a fundamentally disruptive technology. And it can help only with small improvements to have a huge impact on economy and society. Let's take one example. So if you think about drug development, take years, right, to develop a new drug. So quantum computers could potentially bring this down to months. And reducing the time also means reducing the cost. And this makes affordable healthcare for everyone in, let's say, within reach in the next couple of years.
So let's look at the success story of quantum computing. Actually, if we look at the milestones that have been achieved, which means the developments that have been achieved, then quantum computing is indeed a European story. Many of the milestones happened here, even in Vienna and in Innsbruck. And here on this pie chart, we listed the things that we think are the milestones. Of course, one can count things a bit differently. But so to say, overall, Europe played a huge role in developing quantum technology and quantum computers.
This was the good part of the pie charts. Now follows what's happening now. And as you can see, Europe is renowned for public investment, public funding. This is what we're good for, right? But it's only half to what China is investing in terms of money on public finance. And then we look over to the private investment part. It's even sadder because US 45%, Europe 10%, and this is, we have to say that 25% of all quantum startups are in Europe, but only share 10% of the investment. And US doesn't even count for the internal investments that we have at Google, Amazon, and so on. So this doesn't get better.
Which means we somehow have to find a position for ourselves in Europe. And that's how we structured our company, or how we structured our business model. We don't want to compete with the US or with China by saying, okay, we have to achieve technological sovereignty in Europe, and we have to do this by, so to say, rebuilding or building a full stack quantum computer in Europe. What we actually have to do is we have to achieve technological sovereignty by being part of the worldwide quantum computer, which means we have to supply to the hardware developers, for example, in the US and in China, with critical pieces.
And this is what we do. So as you can see in the picture, at Parity, all we do is we are located in Austria and Europe, but we provide critical IP for hardware developers worldwide. So we're going to be this key component within the quantum stack. So a little bit about our business model. So the first part of it is about the blueprints. So we're selling blueprints to hardware developers who then build it. It's quite similar to what ARM does. And this is all based on the Parity architecture. And the second part is our operating system, ParityOS, which we sell as software as a service license. And it is a little bit different than what we are used to calling operating system. So our ParityOS, we see it as one operating system that lives in the cloud, but operates all quantum computers.
One interesting thing in quantum computing is that the technology, like on the fundamental building blocks, is not decided yet which of them is actually the best one, which means there is a huge risk in the hardware. So if we would start a hardware company, for example, now, we would make a very strong bet on one hardware. Here the pictures are somehow showing different ways how currently quantum computers are built. The first one is probably the most famous one, the Google experiment, which has this golden chandelier. But there's many other technologies, and it's not clear which of these technology will actually win the race. Now, one very unique thing about our business model is that our architecture works with all of them. So our architecture is independent of the actual hardware. And it's not independent in a sense that it doesn't matter what's below. Actually, it's independent in the sense that we can give advantages to any of these platforms. So we are somehow the kingmakers of the hardware platform, which can, with our architecture, actually get the edge over others. And this is not just true for the hardware, for the different hardware, this is also true for the different methods. So quantum computing is currently developing from so-called near-term computers to something which is fully fault tolerant. And our architecture has solutions also for all these intermediate stages. So we are not saying, okay, we have to develop something and maybe in 10 years it's useful. We strongly believe that something great has to be great during all these stages. Most importantly, the patents, of course. So the license is something that's really fundamental. And we have filed our first patent in 2015. This is a fundamental new way how to do quantum computers. This is the so-called parity architecture. And since then, we have 50 patents worldwide. And we are in the top 10 in Europe and top 50 worldwide in quantum patents.
And I think the next point is what investors always ask. So yeah, this is very nice. You have patents and on, but has anybody actually built this so far? And yes, we can say this. We're going to show you some examples afterwards. So hardware developers in the US, in Japan, and in Europe are building with our architecture already.
Some highlights, or why would they actually build with our architecture? So architecture means that we are in the middle of the stack, which means it influences the part on top, like the software, but it also influences the part on the hardware side. And in both directions, we have some world records. For example, in the algorithmic side, the parity architecture is the most efficient way to do the so-called Shor's algorithm. Shor's algorithm is the algorithm for quantum computing which will allow us to reverse cryptographic algorithms. And ParityQC is indeed the worldwide most efficient algorithm to do this. Also, on the on the hardware side, there are several advantages for several platforms, but it can be summarized as a really scalable system. So our architecture consists of only one building block, which can be basically copied over the whole chip, and the complexity of this chip does not increase with the size. And this makes it the only truly scalable quantum architecture.
So, first example will be Japan. Since 2020, we're working together with NEC. NEC is one of these huge electronic suppliers. I think some of you remember NEC TVs and so on. But they were also the first ones to build superconducting quantum computers. And they decided in 2020 that they're going to build with our architecture. And in 2023, we had the first NEC parity chip available online.
Then maybe the largest contract that we ever received was this one. So the German DLR, so this is Deutsche Luft- und Raumfahrt, they awarded the largest contract ever for quantum computing, which was for 208 million. They bought 5 quantum computers, and actually 2 of them are delivered by us together in a consortium with NXP. So this is a chip manufacturer, and another company called Electron, which is actually packaging and making the quantum computer work. And the picture that you see here is Olaf Scholz actually inaugurating this quantum computer with a button. And on the left side, you see the actual quantum computer. So it's still pretty bulky. It takes a full room. But this is an actual picture. So this is not AI generated. This is an actual photo of our quantum computer in Hamburg.
And the next step is to get these bulky quantum computers in something that, for example, in this case, the German military can use on site. I recently won a tender together with Quantum Brilliant, which is the hardware developer, to build a miniaturized version of a quantum computer. And as you can see, the picture below, this is the quantum computer then in its full size, and it's only 30 centimeters high. And it should be very robust, and it should be lightweight, and should be small, so you can actually travel around. And we were one of 3 consortia that has been selected to build this with our architecture.
So, as a summary, a few facts about the company. So, the company was founded in 2020 as a spin-off of the University Innsbruck and the Austrian Academy of Sciences.
3 years later, we became profitable. Back then, the only quantum company, pure quantum company in the world who achieved that.
2024, we had our first financing round, actually together with PCII, which we will hear in a few minutes.
We have 60 plus phenomenal team members who were coming to our locations from all over the world. So we have currently 16 nationalities working together on the Parity architecture.
4 locations, so headquartered in Innsbruck and subsidiaries in Germany, UK, and France.
We have 11 consortia building with the Parity architecture.
And 50 partners working with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights and giving us an introduction. So as we work now, we welcome on stage Judith from BCII to give a bit of a perspective on why they decided to invest in ParityQC, and this conversation will be moderated here by Lisa.
Thank you.
Hello again. Great to be back and now talk about really one of, I would say, Austria's most interesting and at this point probably also most successful companies that is still a bit under the radar, if I may say this, because I sometimes have the feeling that everyone is talking about the fancy, glamorous B2C companies, be it Bitpanda, be it GoStudent, and these are great companies, don't get me wrong, but I think the really cool tech is actually happening in university spin-off, so it's cool to now put this on center stage and really talk about this. So I guess for most of you, this was the first touch point with quantum computing. Not for Susanne, that's great. But I guess this is where I think we should also do like a bit of a deep dive and kind of get a more commercial perspective to things. But before this, first question to Julia. When they first pitched to you and when you first met them, were you like, great, I completely understand exactly what they're doing in the nittiest, grittiest details? Or were you like, okay, this sounds interesting, but I need to learn more about quantum computing? So the question is, what was the reason to invest in them and how familiar were you with the topic before? Or was it for you also this case where we're like, hey, we want to invest in the future technology, we want to be one of the first ones because that makes sense? And were you like, okay, let's take the risk, even if we maybe not understand to the fullest detail what is actually happening?
So to answer this question, I maybe need to elaborate a bit on how we got to new ParityQC, because BNC is primarily known for its industrial investment, so for the core shareholdings in Amag, Lenzing, Semperit. But we also have this innovation investment part where we invest in technology growth companies. And besides that, we also have some initiatives to foster Austria as a business location. And one of them is the so-called Huschka Prize. And the Huschka Prize is the largest privately awarded prize for application-driven research. And Wolfgang won the Huschka Prize in 2019. So we already knew that there is an interesting research. And then a couple of years later, we kind of met again, or exactly said it was at another conference where we hosted a panel and where we invited them to speak. And then we got to talk with each other, and we realized that it might be a good fit for us to invest and for them to have us as their investor. Because I think one misconception in the startup world, especially our investment world, is that the startups that they pitch and then the investor decides if they want to invest or not. But in the really good companies, it's usually the other way around, so that you kind of also have to pitch as an investor and show what you can add to the value of the company.
Very true, especially in market environments like this. Competition is rough on the investor side. So thanks for these insights. Now back to the two of you. So you're building one of the world's most successful quantum computing companies, which is insane, if I may say that. Because I mean, I think we all should be proud of the companies that Austrians are building and support them top notch. Sometimes I have the feeling that especially when it comes to governmental funding for these kind of topics, the situation is not that great, but we're going to get to this in a second. Before, we would like to understand, or I'm asking on behalf of the audience, could you give us some real-life examples for the use of quantum computing? Like, let's imagine that I'm bringing along my godchild. She's 4, she's incredibly smart, but she is not a PhD in physics. So can you give her an idea of what is the use case, where is it used, and how does quantum computing make our everyday lives better? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, maybe I just go first. So one use case that we really like is optimization problems. If you think about quantum computing, there's like 2 messages that are typically brought. One is with quantum computers, we have completely different things that we can calculate. We can, for example, break cryptography and things like this, which is the so-called exponential speedup, which means completely new applications. However, there's also another form of applications where quantum computers will give a so-called polynomial speedup, which means a speedup of current calculations. And optimization problems is an example of that. And for us as a company, this is the most interesting region, because optimization problems are omnipresent. If you think about Amazon or any larger company, Amazon, for example, has to optimize the routes at how they deliver your books to your door and how they take it out of the shelf. And if you are able to only optimize this by, I don't know, 10%, then this is already a huge market, simply because Amazon is so big. And so that's why we are focusing on applications which are already in our daily lives, machine learning, optimization, things like this, which are at the moment requiring computational resources, and we will replace them. So this means quantum computers will not be computers on your desk. They will be CPUs or more or less GPUs running in server farms.
Okay, so it's about optimization. It's about making things better, faster. Looking at the things that we're doing in our everyday lives. Okay, so I understand we're not using it like in front of our computer, so we're not gonna sort of exchange our MacBooks with a quantum computer, understood? But is there any kind of specific example that you could share with us? Like, let's say, me as a venture capitalist, where would I encounter this topic? Where would I encounter this kind of optimization problem? And where would I see a significant speed up in my experience with certain companies, with certain daily life experience, with governmental organizations, whatever it might be?
So as a venture capitalist, I assume you're traveling a lot, right? And I think it bothers you that you have to wait for your plane, or if it's delayed, or it's canceled, right?
No, as you know, I love waiting. It's my passion.
I know. Everybody does, of course. So what happens in airports is that they have to calculate all the routes, and not only the routes, but how to bring passenger A to from A to B. What do you do with your luggage and so on? And this is calculated overnight because it takes such a long time. So what do you do if a plane, I don't know, has something that they have to repair about, or that one is delayed and the other one has to wait, or something like this? Can't be calculated in real time. But with a quantum computer, you could. So your route would be optimized nearly immediately. So this would actually reduce waiting times a lot. It would help optimize routing your luggage around, or yourself around. And this is where you would encounter quantum computing. You wouldn't notice it because you don't notice the supercomputer anyways now that calculates it, but this would actually help make your life a little bit easier. But this is not the great challenge. The great challenge is, of course, healthcare and food distribution and so on. So, but this would be a thing where you would encounter it.
So with so many potential use cases, so many opportunities, and still being a technology that is fairly new, how did you as an investor, Julia, assess the market potential of this? Like how? Because part of making investment decisions obviously is the team, especially in early stages, and it's the market opportunity. And I mean, assessing the team can be done. I think we've all found our measures of how to do this and what we look for and what kind of people we like to work with. But sometimes coming up with the market potential, calculating the market size, and also evaluating the go-to-market strategy can be super tough. How did you do this in this specific case? How did you approach this?
We tried to speak to as many experts as possible and to do as much research as possible. Then, I mean, investment is also about trust. So we trusted them, what they told us about the market, because they are the experts and we don't know anything better than they do. For us, also was important the IP and their IP strategy, so that it's not only patents, but the whole strategy around. So, of course, that has a value for an investor because it's kind of a downside protection, but also you gain the value from the IP that is leveraged. And yeah, we tried to include as many views as possible, but of course you have to take risks. I mean, it's a deep tech investment, we have to be aware of that. We are risk investors, we have to live with that, and once we are convinced that the chances are higher than the risks, then we invest. Yeah, we have a view for the company, and we are confident that they will go this way, but we are also aware that it's not secured.
Actually, you now touched upon a point that I think is quite interesting because, as you said, we are risk investors. So everyone who is investing into early stage companies, even at more advanced stages, is taking a significant risk. We know that we do this for the significant returns that we will hopefully get at one point. So I'm wondering, from the perspective of the three of you, on the one hand side from a fundraising perspective and a company perspective, but also from an investor's perspective, are Austrian investors or generally European investors more risk averse than others? And now I'm assuming that this is the case, also like looking at, for example, the US and that the speed that they have there, the amount of risk that they are taking, the amount of money that is actually being deployed there. I'm wondering, also sort of connected to the previous panel, is there actually a realistic chance that we in Europe, and especially in Austria, will catch up to this and that we will become relevant and that we will be faster and that we will be the ones backing and building the companies that are the world game changers? I know this is an unpopular question.
So I have to answer it. No, I think we can look at other regions or nations and what they do good, but in Europe we also have to look at what we do good, and especially in Austria we have a large industrial basis, at least for now. I hope so that it will also be here in the future, and we have good universities and great research, and so I think it's important as investors to also look at what we are good at and what are areas that we can invest in, and for us that is clearly, for example, quantum computing, as the history of quantum computing, especially in Austria, is quite successful, but we're not so good in applying this to the commercial world as well, and so that's where we see a great chance here.
So what do the two of you think from a company's perspective, also from your fundraising journey and what you hear from other companies probably as well?
Yeah, I mean, so in our case, it's maybe, as I think many of you already said it, a bit different with the direction of how we approached funding. So in our case, we have been approached by many investors, and in particular also investors, international investors. And for us, it was extremely important that for now, where we are really fearing these silos or these blocks of US, China, and Europe, somehow separating quantum computing, all of these, or at least two of the blocks, have identified quantum computing as extremely important and something that they are really pushing. So for us, it was somehow important to keep the company a European company. And so actually, one other way to tell the story how we met is that we had investment or questions for investment, and we actually approached then BCI if instead of, so to say, taking international investors, we could do this in Austria. So I would say the answer to your question is somehow that BCI somehow already showed this, that they can compete, that they are waking up, and that they can compete in the international market.
Why was it important for you to actually prefer Austrian investors and take their money instead of having a US investor, for example, coming in? Because still, I would argue that they're probably faster, probably write bigger checks, probably take higher valuations, which is good from a company's perspective, right?
Yeah, we thought long about this, or not so long. Actually, it was pretty clear.
You just
So-
love Austria.
No, yeah, that's of course for the press here. We love Austria. That's all right. The thing is, quantum computing is a dual-use technology, so it has civilian applications, but it does have military applications as well. So governments all around the world invest a lot of money. In fact, around 60 billion into this technology. And it is, as Wolfgang already said, it is a fight between three silos where two are very relevant and the one has to find a vision for itself. And what Europe does, and I said it before, it has a lot of money invested in public funding. And these calls that are out, all these consortia that are building, and also these tenders that we won, they require a clear strategy that you're gonna be in Europe. You have a clear cap table that where nobody has to ask any questions. We have in Europe this foreign investment. I think Julia can talk a lot about this policy, where whenever you sell a larger amount of your company, you have to ask on a European level if this is allowed. So there are lots of tensions and lots of things that you have to think about. And as Wolfgang already said, we want to be an independent company. We don't want to struggle ourselves with dealing with this as well. We have to build up a worldwide company, but it's easier if we do this with investors from here. It was not easy to think about who can actually do this and is willing to play on the same level as US investors. But luckily we found somebody in BCI who actually went this way with us.
How many investors did you identify that were potentially able to take that risk and willing to take that risk? Is it more like 5? Is it more like 50? Is it like 10? 1? I was at it from the audience.
Yeah, no, it was pretty clear that we want to approach BCI.
Okay, because I think, so the reason why I wanted to stretch this topic a bit is because, as discussed before, we are risk takers, but sometimes we see also in early stages that investors have like crazy expectations and that pre-seed companies need to go out there and they are expected to have significant traction, already make significant revenues, already have a perfect financial model, already have a team in place, and this is just not possible in the very early stages. And I know that our business is to de-risk the risk that we're taking, but in some cases I think we're standing in our ways, and this is why Americans and Asian investors are eating our lunch, and why we as Europeans sit here, complaining that they're taking away the good companies, whereas they probably don't have any other opportunity. So I think there's lots of learning opportunity here. This is what I want to say, and also maybe an idea or like hint to also reflect on how you're approaching startups and your own strategies. So thanks for sharing this. So now coming again like back to this topic of Austria, because you said there's lots of public funding everywhere in Europe. What is the situation in Austria? Because I don't have the feeling that the topic of quantum computing is particularly high on the agenda of Austrian politicians. I think this could be a field where we could really position ourselves perfectly because, frankly speaking, again, making enemies, but I don't care. I don't think that Austria is particularly good in anything. We try to be kind of nice-ish in most of the things, and this has never, in history, led to excellence. I think quantum computing is one of the fields where we could be excellent because we have you, we have other companies, we have perfect research here. Why is this not on top of the agenda? Another unpopular question. Maybe Julia wants to start again.
We don't know. I mean, we think that it's really an important topic. In other areas, we already lost against other regions. So I think this is really a field where we can excel. And I think in Austria, maybe it's still that you want to fund everything a little bit instead of taking the risk to approach one topic properly. And I think that comes close also to like investors. We only did this one investment this year because we are not a fund and we don't have investment pressure, and we only invest if we really think that this is an important technology, and that, of course, we want value creation, so we want that the value increases. And if you see that it fits with our investment focus, so we only did this one this year because we really see a potential there.
Gotcha.
Let's say Austria is really afraid to be good at something, as you say. So maybe there could be success. And also Austria is, or Europe is still in doubt if quantum computing is something important. And it's kind of a hassle to talk to politicians and convince them, especially in Austria, that this is something that they should focus on. I don't know if there are any politicians, anybody knows politicians, then please tell them that this is not something that goes away as the internet. So we should invest now.
Doesn't the internet go away? I think some people are still unsure about that, to be honest. So I'm sort of summarizing this with, and I couldn't agree more, it's Austrian way is giving everyone just a tiny bit. So it's like too much to die, but it's also actually not enough to survive and to really build something excellent, which is a pity because I think we could do better. So Marcus Raunig on stage just said that what we need is kind of obviously sort of the framework that allows us to build great companies. We need talent, and we also need the money. I think this is particularly true for university spin-offs, as you are. So maybe we want to dive a bit into this, because I think lots of investors in the room are actually interested in sourcing great university spin-offs, investing in really techy companies. But it's not really happening, and it's not happening at scale. Because when you look at Switzerland, when you look at ETH, for example, we see way more spin-offs than in Austria per year. And it's just one university that is doing this. What do you think needs to change in Austria? It's going to be an unpopular question again, and I'm sorry for this. But what do you think what needs to change in Austria to also accelerate the spin-off ecosystem by 10x in the next 5 years?
Okay, I start again. Maybe we start with like business education, so that business education is common knowledge, and not as is nowadays, that only some people know how like their personal finances work. If business education would be more taught already in early school days, I think that would be a start, because then we have more people that want to fund their own companies, and also we have to have experienced investors, because we have to have both. We have the ones that fund the companies, and then we have the ones who provide the money, and both need to know what to do. So I think that would be a start. And then I think also the universities have to know what investors expect, because us as investors, when we look at the cap table of a company, it's one of the most important things actually. So if there's already a cap table where you don't know who belongs to and who has special rights and so on, it's unattractive to invest. So that is important. And also, of course, especially in a deep tech company, as I said before, IP. So it has to be clear who owns the patents, who owns the IP, what's the strategy around that. And that has to be done in a business thinking mindset and not necessarily in a research mindset.
I'm wondering if there's any incentive for universities and also for potential people who are building spin-offs to actually do this, because you're now referring, okay, the business mindset is lacking. We probably have issues when it comes to IP. Cap table might be a bit messy. So do you have any kind of also concrete examples which you've seen in the companies that you've been analyzing and passing on in the past years due to these reasons?
Yes, of course. We have declined companies because of their cap table, for example, or because the IP was not managed properly. And I think the most important thing for us is that our interests are aligned. Like, for example, in this case, we also are like co-shareholders with universities, and we all should have the same goal, so that the company is the most successful company, and then our interests are aligned. And I think if the universities understand this, then yeah, there's no obstacles for investors to invest in those companies.
How does the two of you feel about this? Especially you, Wolfgang, being a professor at the University of Innsbruck, you've probably seen lots of things, also see what's happening at other universities. Are there also any kind of best practices like internationally where it would be like, hey, Austria, please copy and paste this. This would really tremendously help everyone.
Yeah, I'm not so deep into so to say, the startup starting field, so I can probably only say from my experience. One thing is, for example, in our case, the thing that I invented was always considered as fundamental research. So actually, nobody would have even thought about patenting this. So if I wouldn't have, so to say, due to some circumstances, said, okay, we have to patent this, there wouldn't even be thinking about it. So people would have thought this as fundamental research, and that's it. And I think it shows a bit the mentality that we have at our universities. It's a bit, okay, if you're a good scientist, it means you do fundamental research. If you're a second grade scientist, you do applied science. And so there's like this Austrian hierarchy of the less people understand what you're doing, the better, and the more fundamental it must be. So I think it's a lot about mindset. And then the other side at the university, I think there the mindset is changing a little bit at least. So if you say incentive, I mean, in the end they have a few percentage in the company. So I mean, this should be incentive enough, I would say. This I think comes a bit from the US system. So universities somehow, I think, understand that, for example, Stanford or so on, they finance a lot, not just from the football team, but also from the startups that they created. And so I would say the university are changing a bit. And in general, I have to say, my approach to this is that we should not always ask for the governments or for the universities or for the system to change. Somehow we also just have to adapt to the system, no? And so, for example, I think really, really good ideas and really good people will make it also in Austria.
Agree. And I hope that they are actually staying to do this and not making their lives more complicated by staying here. So I guess that's what most people are asking for these days. So Magdalena, what's your perspective, also with your background at the IACT and having seen it all, having worked closely with Cambridge? Okay, handle closed.
Yeah, no, it's of course a question that we had to deal with for quite a long time. I mean, with Wolfgang, you had a professor who had an offer from one of the biggest US companies to sell the whole IP, go to the US, have a nice life, and so on. And he decided against it. So you would assume that this would something in Austria would say, okay, we're proud of this. Let's support people who are doing this. On the other hand, you have universities with no clear structure on how to spin out companies. There is no guidelines that they're used to. It's always a year-long negotiation on how many percentage they are taking, how much. Now we have this weird combination between getting a share of the company and having a royalty model. So you actually take liquidity out of the company even after you invest in or you have shares in there. So if you want to do this like Stanford and so on, take as a company or as a university, take no more than 5%, be quiet and just let them work. So this would be my suggestion.
Probably also the suggestion for most investors. Yeah. Just let the companies work. And obviously I don't want to blame our industry, but we also see that sometimes, the founders know it best. I think Julia also put it there. I mean, those are the experts who are building the company. None of us investors will ever be and should ever be an expert in quantum computing, for example, because that's not our jobs. It's our job to enable companies like yours and founders like yourselves to do a good job, build amazing companies, be there on the sideline and help when we actually can be useful and not be a pain in the ass. So lots of learnings that we're taking away. And I know that there are also some people in the audience that are coming from universities, working on spin-off initiatives, not always having an easy time to actually push these topics, because also within universities, there are obviously different interests, because also they can be quite political. unfortunately. But I think there is this common interest and common vision on this panel in terms of what could be done. So close this panel, because I think we are the ones who are standing in between the lunch break and who are like preventing people from getting some food. Also for you, the kind of unpopular, but I think still popular question of the moonshot prediction for next year. And yes, I stole this from Marcus because I think that's just a very cool question to ask. So what's your moonshot prediction for next year connected to tech? So I'm not limiting it to Austria, not limiting it to Europe. You could also come up with things like Elon Musk is going to be the next advisor to Donald Trump to foster startup, etc.
That's not a prediction, right? That is.
It's a reality.
Fact, yeah.
Then maybe something different. So anything connected to tech, as said, could be technology, could be legislation, could be whatever it is.
Still, our purpose is fostering entrepreneurship in Austria, so I will stay with Austria, and especially with entrepreneurship. So, as I said, this year we only did one investment. So my prediction is that our pipeline improves for next year, and there's many companies that we can invest in.
Nice.
ParityQC will have some breakthrough papers with large companies on the hardware side.
I agree.
That's too cheap.
Um,
Now we need like one really, really big thing. And if it's not coming true, it's fine. Then we'll just hold you accountable next year and you're going to be on stage again.
yeah, I see this Steve Ballmer moment. No, I do think that quantum computing will play a significant role next year. And it's going to be either in China or in America. And we really hope that Europe also has a vision to invest in this industry, because we need something other than automotive, Volkswagen or BMW.
I like that one. So thank you to the three of you. And as always, call to the action for the audience. And I know that you're taking away quite some homework from the past panels. But as you've heard, this is one of the most exciting companies that we have in this country. This is one of the most exciting and most relevant technologies that is currently being built, where we can actually be on the forefront of something. So please go out, talk about quantum, talk about this company, help them to make Austria aware that we can be good at something, and that Europe is also playing a very important role in something that is going to have a tremendous impact on our lives, and that we're not sleeping again and missing everything that's important, like we've done with AI. Thank you so much.
Thank you.